Hi, everybody. I know most of you, and you know me. I'm Jenny Brockpaller, the director of the Ames Community Arts Council. Thank you so much for joining us on a summer day for a gathering of artists. I'm excited to hear from Melissa. She is in her shop, but has prepared a slide deck for us just because that was an easier way to present the material and it makes a lot of sense. So I'm not going to waste a lot of her time. I'm going to turn it right over to Melissa and you can introduce yourself and get us started.
Hi, I'm Melissa Stenstrom, and um, welcome to my studio. So I'm over at 507 Main Street, and I thought this was an excellent opportunity to take advantage of um, being in a small space, sharing it with everyone without having to try to negotiate having a tight space with all of the COVID stuff still kind of lingering. Um, at this point, I'm pretty much fully operational here and have been vaccinated. And I know most people that are coming around have been. However, it's still one of those times where I think it's always a concern health-wise to make sure everyone stays safe. So a lot of my presentation that I put together focuses on things that I was doing in this past year and currently, because it kind of seemed really limiting to get access to people during COVID. And so I picked out pictures to share with everyone that related to some of the projects that I went through. So without further ado, I think I'll show my space to you. Maybe. Okay, yeah. Okay, so I have, when you come into my building, the first part of my studio space that you see is actually displays of things that I have available for everyone to look at. So jewelry that I've made, loose stones that are available for creating custom pieces, and then an assortment of things that have been made by other artists as well. So I have a collection of minerals from a group, well, it's a couple. They're called Cabinet Curiosities. And they have traveled the world and collected these mineral specimens. And I have several of them available if people are interested in minerals or rock hounds. And they're kind of a fun talking feature. I have also, for a number of years now, had several pieces created by Lucky Kim. She's an area artist that makes things with a number of different materials. So the things that I have in my space tend to be more of her paper art that she's done, as well as a few of these. So her paper art's like decoupage kind of, but she uses some of the traditional, from many different places around the world, traditional paper cutting techniques. So she's from Korea originally and does Korean inspired pieces. And then she's got, different paper techniques that she works with from around the world. So I think she had some Polish stuff that I recall here, and then some things that look kind of like traditional silhouettes. So all of that is included. I have some pottery from Steve Aitchison and paintings by Anna Sagner and Norma Wolf. And oftentimes I acquire these things to have here when I've done the art walk with other artists and hosted them here. Oh, and I hosted Mary Howard last year during COVID for the art walk, which was really not an art walk. Oh, sorry. So Mary Howard wrote a book called Whiteout. And so I have that on the table there, the poster for it. So encouraging the literary arts as well as the visual arts. Okay. This is actually going more into my space where you can see more of the areas where I'm working. My benches here in the background, this piece. This is still kind of the area where I might work with customers in designing custom pieces or talking about things that they want to have done with their jewelry. And then this to the right is my actual workbench. It's a little bit on the cluttered side. Whenever I get really actively involved in making things, I do not get actively involved in cleaning things. I'll have kind of a system of knowing where everything's at, but there's quite a mess involved and clutter to it. So right now, I'm making an engagement ring, and I'm going to talk to you more about it in a little bit, but it's kind of taking up all my mental capacity to make it, so then I don't worry about cleaning until things are done. Okay, so, and this is the back room where I have my torch. The torch is used for a lot of different parts of the processes, a lot of soldering where I'm joining metal together, and also for casting. My kiln, whoops, I am pretty good at, my computer is very, very sensitive, and it just likes to move things along. It's like, just keep going. Okay, so I have here, let's see. I think I actually remember looking at how to find a laser pointer. Here we go. All right, so this is a kiln. I use the kiln actually for casting. Some people with jewelry will use it for things like enameling, or they might use it for the precious metal clay. I've never used it for those processes, but a week ago, someone had precious metal clay that they had acquired somehow and didn't want it. So I ended up saying, okay, sure, I'll give that a try. And so now maybe I'll try that out. We'll see. Something to learn. Anyway, this is the soldering bench. This is back here where you see the bubble. That's actually where I do the casting. So there's two parts to casting. One is preparing the plaster that your model goes into, and you need the vacuum pressure to actually remove all the air bubbles, so it doesn't have little pockets of air that the metal can go into and create little bubbles on your jewelry. And then the other half, which is pretty much not visible, but there's a little crucible sitting there. The crucible is what you put your plaster into, and you have your wax model in there. And when it's in there, it goes into the kiln to melt the wax out, and it creates an empty cavity where you pour molten metal. So that is my casting setup back there. At the furthest point in the room is actually a rectifier and plating materials to plate metal if someone wants gold plating or palladium plating. I do both of those. Okay, so that's the space, and I use all parts of it, and there's not enough of it because I keep finding more and more things to pick up. But that's the main stuff that I'm working with. And oh, here, this is the buffing motor, and you can see it when you walk through the door here. Next to it, I have a whole bunch of dapping punches, and I love tools. Can't get enough of them. I use them all. So during COVID, there was a point this past winter where everyone that came to visit me said they wanted a bracelet. So I have a series of bracelets to show you, or cuffs, depending. So this was one of the ones I actually ended up working on it for a couple of years, maybe more. I have a very regular customer, and I've done several other jobs for her, but she had these stones that her daughter had given her. They're all cubic zirconia, which is a man-made stone. And they were part of this system bracelet where you could pop them in and out and change the colors that you wanted. But she just really liked the way they looked. Cubic zirconia was created to be an alternative to diamonds. It's rather hard in terms of the material. It's a 9 on the Mohs scale, which is similar to a sapphire. A diamond is a 10, which is the hardest. And both of them can wear very well, particularly on things like bracelets, rings. It's going to take a lot to beat them up. Now, you can get abrasion with cubic zirconia that you don't get with diamonds. And that's oftentimes when I'm asked, is this a diamond or something else? I start looking for the abrasion on the facets, and then I can tell. And they also when they cut the facets, they just don't look quite the same between a diamond and a cubic zirconia. So that's another indicator for me as a jeweler, what material I'm working with. But we worked together for a while on this design, and I talked with her a lot about things that she wanted, gave her several options. And then it was after looking at several things that we really came to a conclusion that this was what she wanted. And she's really happy with it now. So this was one of the first ones that I did. But then shortly after that, I had someone come in who had seen a pendant that I actually did put in my queue, but I'm doing bracelets first. So she saw this pendant. Well, actually it was her husband, and he wanted to get her a birthday present. So then she came in and we talked about what she wanted. So most of what I do as a custom jeweler is try to actually create the pieces that someone else says that they really want to have something in particular, and using my skill set to create it so that they can have a very unique and personalized piece of jewelry. So this customer's name is Irit. And irit means, it's a type of flower, very similar to an iris. It's in the same asphodel family, but it's one that you might find like in Africa, the Mediterranean, and she's from Israel. So it was something that they see in Israel. So I designed this piece with her in mind. The flowers here are 18 karat gold, and they are the Irit flower. And she also wanted to have pearls, and she had some really specific ideas. She really liked toggles. So I was able to put it together the way she wanted it. So going in a very different direction from the previous cuff that we just looked at, but trying to make it very personalized to Irit in this case, so that she could have that piece that she would really enjoy and want to wear. All right, so this is another cuff that I did, and this one was a graduation gift, and it's the last one that I'm going to talk about tonight. So this was a gift given to a young man who had graduated from Iowa State, and when I initially talked to him about it, his mom was having it commissioned for him, but he was actively participating in the design. He told me about some of his life events that he wanted to include in this pendant. And one was that he had taken a trip with his bandmates. He was in a band, and they'd gone to California and driven up the coast, I think from LA to San Francisco, but along the way, they had stopped at a beach and he had collected a seashell. And the other thing that he told me about was that he wanted to have on the inside of the ring a message written from a fable that says, "This too shall pass." And he wanted to have it in his mom's handwriting. So she wrote the phrase down for me, and then I was able to engrave that on the inside. When we talked about what he wanted for a design on the outside of his cuff, he was a little bit more vague. He just knew that he wanted to have the shell included that he had picked up along the highway. As I was working with him, I asked him about things that interested him, and one of the things he said really interested him was lines. He wanted to have lines. And he wanted to have it relate to the shell. So he wanted me to cut out a piece from the shell, which is what I did. And that's actually here. And I saw a photograph. I get like a newsletter from the Museum of Modern Art, and they had several pictures of things that were featured. And one of the photographs they had was like a drone picture that someone had taken where you could see the water washing up onto the beach with the waves, and that there was different kind of line patterns between the waves and how they moved versus the sand on the beach and how where the waves had pulled back, it created different lines. So I actually showed him that particular photo and said, okay, how would you feel about having these kind of organic lines? Like, we're not going to have anything really specific to the photograph for the lines, but just to create that feeling of water coming up onto the beach. So that was the pattern that I ended up designing here, showing that the horizontal organic lines are the waves of the water, and the vertical lines here with some horizontals show that where the water had pulled back through with the sand, and created that pattern for his design. And then he picked out kind of just a kind of shell triangular shape that he wanted me to use with the seashell. And so I ended up cutting out a portion of it to include on the piece, just to add another layer of sentimentality to this piece, which I didn't put into my write-up here, but he actually, one of the people that was on the trip with him was his best friend, and was supposed to move to Oregon with him following graduation, but that friend died in a car accident. So he was feeling very attached to the shell as being part of that memento, reminding him of the last thing that he got to do that was fun with this friend. So I think that kind of also factors into his choice with the engraving on the inside. Okay, so that's part of what I did in this past spring and related to custom jewelry, making it personalized, but showing you 3 very different things that were the same kind of cuff bracelet idea. Okay, so Irit was actually inspired by this piece. This was a necklace that I made for one of my customers that comes in. He oftentimes gets pieces made for his wife where he has me include an oak leaf on it, because his name is Oak Leaf in translation. So it always has a bit of him in the necklaces for her. And in translation, her name is Water. And so this boulder opal, which doesn't actually have any water in it, it is actually opalized wood and ironwood matrix. It looks like water. And actually, when you look at it in person, you feel like you can see into the depths. It's kind of like you're spelunking or something down in the ocean and looking through caves. So it's got references visually to water. So that one was their piece. And he showed the pendant to Irit's husband, who then came and had her flower bracelet made. Okay, so this is another piece that I worked on for a while for one of my customers who had bought a pair of earrings from me that was very similar, but they only had yellow sapphires on them, and they did not have all these points on the tops and bottoms. And I always saw them as being kind of stylized butterfly wings. And actually, I'm good friends with her daughter, and her daughter has a fascination with butterflies. And so it kind of, I think it spans the generations. So she saw those stylized butterfly wings as well and wanted to have matching jewelry made. So I've made a pendant, and I'm in the process of making a ring for her. But this is the pendant. And she went through and picked out several sapphires that she just really liked. And she said, this is my birthday present. And we went with it. So this is her sapphire pendant, referencing a stylized butterfly wing. Okay, so not too long ago, I had someone come in who wanted earrings that would be flowers for his girlfriend to give her for their anniversary. And so that was over the 4th of July. And so now I feel like I can put pictures out once we've gone past the 4th of July holiday. So these are her daisy earrings. She actually has 2 holes on each ear. So we did a lever back that had a dangle, but not too big, and then a tiny stud. So the lever backs have a 2.5 millimeter sapphire, that's a blue sapphire. And the daisies are about 9 millimeters round. And then the studs are actually 4 millimeters. So they're teeny tiny, and they have 2 millimeter, no, it was less than 2 millimeter. It was 1.6 millimeter or 7 millimeter pomegranate sapphires. So just a nice, like punchy orangey color that goes with the blue, complementary back and forth, and would stand out on her ears. So it's kind of like a reverse daisy in a way, because normally the daisies have the yellow and then the white, but maybe these are like more like brown-eyed Susans or something like that. Who knows? It's kind of fun, but just enjoying the flowers and the possibilities. So I made these by engraving the metal. I started with a circular disc and then do cut out and then engraving into it to create those flower petals. So engraving would include what literally it comes from the process of intaglio, which was the Italian word to cut into. And so engraving is done with printmaking, but it's also done by jewelers to create designs and more or less draw on the metal to show patterns and different surfaces. And you can create thicks and thins like the flower petals. Okay, so going in that vein of engraving and earrings, this was my first ever pair of weighted earrings. So the person that received them had stretched the holes of their ears larger and wore heavier earrings to maintain stretching their ears. So I was given a weight for each earring and had to really carefully weigh everything as I was working to make sure I didn't go over or under a certain range, because they wanted to have them weighted. Something that's very different about them is that instead of proposing with an engagement ring, this person decided to propose with engagement earrings because they said that their now fiance, not before, but at the time, didn't wear rings at all, only earrings. And so they felt that this was the appropriate type of jewelry that they would want for an engagement. So there was actually a whole special process. So they didn't know anything about the earrings. It was completely arranged by Freddie, and he had a plan where he gave me the weights and picked out all the different parts and the design stuff that wanted included. And then he gave them to her at the Field Museum and proposed in front of Sue the dinosaur. So there was a huge, like I had to be quiet, don't talk about it. Don't put stuff on social media until it was all done, just in case. And I guess when they arrived there, like he said that she was so curious about what was in this box, but he kept it secret until the event. So I got not a notice, but a text message on Sunday when I was walking around at the Ryman Gardens Art Fair that she said yes. So it's all good. Now I can show him off and talk about him. So when Freddie was going through different design ideas with me, he was really hoping to include things that referenced her interest in kind of really kind of vintage looking witchy stuff. And gave me this list of things where I was like, I'm not sure. So I did this theme. We've got eyes with the blue. They're fancy diamonds. So they're blue and they're rose cuts. Both of them are fancy and rose cuts. And then the lower diamonds here are yellow. But I did the eyes up here and then some different phases of the moon. So we have like crescent moon, and then full moon, and then another moon. I'm sure these are not facing in the right direction if you were going to do a cycle of the moons, but they work well for jewelry. So I took my I guess, artistic license to arrange them. The other thing I included, so I did the octagon and Art Council Community of Artists. What was that? Sorry, Jen, I'm having a
Business
hard
Arts
time.
Conference?
Yes, that.
Yeah.
And I actually did Sarah Merritt's workshop afterwards, and she was showing us like it wasn't Zentangling, but it was basically Zentangling, the doodling. And so one of the things she talked about was sunflowers. So then sunflowers were on my mind. And so I decided instead of doing the sun and the moon, I'd do a sunflower for the earrings. So it's a sunflower and the moon instead. And they liked, well, Freddie liked the design. So now they both do, but at the time it was Freddie that I was talking to. So that's what we went with. And you can see this is the front of the earrings. And then as you look at them, this is the back. And I actually did a traditional technique that you'd see often like in really old European jewelry, which is that you don't just finish the front, you finish the back, because especially with something that large that is going to be hanging from the ear, you're going to see the front and back of it. So you want to have design on both sides. So I engraved into it. So in England, they would have called it an azure, Azure, when you finish the back. Okay, so I guess the UK now, but like the old jewelry. And then in France, it was called an aujour. Oh, yeah, aujour, like day of the day. I don't know why they picked that particular phrase, but if you look at like some of the really well-known like couture jewelry places, they still do this technique. So I wanted to do that for them. It's like, okay, yeah, you need to have it finished on the back as well. You can't just go with the front alone. Okay, and it can't just be like polished on the back, because that wouldn't be any fun. All right, so I did throw in something here that maybe if you had visited the Open Studio Tour and exhibit 2 years ago before COVID, that I actually included parts of in the artist's working presentation, and we had a gallery exhibit. And I showed parts of designing a wax ring that then became a cast ring for another customer. So this is Tracy's ring. And for her, she had picked out a diamond. This is the diamond. It's called a mackle. And it's an uncut diamond that naturally forms in a triangular shape. And there's actually a lot of geometric shapes that diamonds naturally form in. You can get cubes, octahedrons. Sometimes they're tetrahedrons. I think the tetrahedrons are ones where the stone cutters have cut the octahedrons in half. And so those look like pyramids instead of two pyramids stuck together. But you can get a lot of different shapes. And in this case, she wanted the mackle shape that I happen to have. And her partner, Scott, brought in a design that he had come up with. It was like he had had a dream about it and he wanted to use it for a ring. And so I took that design and incorporated it into a wax carving. And the pieces that are on the right, these are the wax carvings. And then on the left is actually the cast ring. Okay, so I started the process with both of them, talking to him about the design that Scott had dreamed about. And then I eventually made sketches for them. And when I'm feeling pretty formal, I actually will make them into small watercolor paintings. And I set their stones that they had picked out onto the paintings for one of the photos. And so I've included that one for you here. So when we did the event for the Open Studio Tour, I had only created the engagement ring, which was the ring we were just looking at. But last August, I actually got to make the other two bands that are included in my painting, and they're here. So the bands are not connected. Sometimes people have their wedding bands soldered together, but Tracy decided that she might want to wear some of them or none of them. You know, it probably she'll always wear some of them. But actually, the last time I talked to her, she told me she'd never taken them all off. Once she had them all, she just wears them all. But she has options. She can wear them as just the two smaller bands, or she can have the larger wedding set on, and she can wear them in whichever arrangement she wants to. So she can have them oriented in the opposite direction with the top and bottom, or however she wants. So you're getting an idea. A lot of times people will only have either one engagement ring and one wedding band that they have maybe soldered together, maybe not. Sometimes they're fitted together, but in this case, she can move them around and do whatever she wants to do when she wears them. So this was an example that I had that has finally finished and come to fruition. And then I also made Scott's ring, and I actually didn't initially make it. I started with a regular band ring. He wanted platinum, but what I did do, and it's still, I mean, it looks the same as when I got it, but on the inside, I actually engraved their two infinity symbols to match her engagement ring. So instead of being like the ring where you can see them raised up, on the inside of his ring, they actually sink in. So they would fit together. If you could actually get them apart and fit them together, you can't fit them together, but it's the negative space instead of the positive. So they go together, even though you might not see it just looking at his ring. He works in construction, and he had some very specific, like he takes it off when he's doing the handwork, but he had some very specific ideas and wanted to keep the design really simple so that it wouldn't get injured. So he gets his design when he takes it off actually and looks at it. And I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't leave like some indentations on his finger of those infinity symbols, because it's pressing on him. All right. So another kind of throwback piece that I put in here to lead into my next thing that I'm going to talk about is actually what I'm doing right now. So a few years ago, I made engagement rings and wedding bands for Kelly and Kevin. And they had me use a technique called mokame gane. Mokame gane is actually a Japanese technique that translates to mean like wood grain metal. And you can see there's two bands here that have a lot of kind of variation in the color of the bands, because there's three different colors of metal that are used, and it creates just unique patterns on the metal surface, because you start off with what's called a billet, and the billet is actually around 16 to 24 layers of metal, and it has alternating colors. In this case, she had the 14 karat red gold, 14 karat white gold with palladium in it, so it looks kind of gray, and then sterling silver, which is what looks white. And I worked with their billet where when I got it in, it was a rod that was, I think, 8 millimeters by 8 millimeters wide, which maybe to you is sounding like, what is she talking about? But it looked very similar to this. This is another billet, one that I brought in more recently. Theirs was longer, and when I worked on their piece, because they wanted to have this continuous band, I actually cut into the top of the metal, and then I'd roll it through a mill and cut deeper in and roll it through a mill, and it would start revealing the different layers and create a design on the surface. And you can see, if you look on the edge here, there's actually lines, and those lines represent that surface on the edge of the metal. And I'm gonna be right back. Okay, sorry to run off on you. This little piece here is actually a sample from theirs. So you can see some of the design. It's pretty random. It's not as easy to control, but, and that's the back. There's still pattern on the back as well. And you can do as much as you want to front and back because you're putting it through the mill or hammering to flatten that surface. And it's not as much of the filing to remove material, but you just put it through the mill and you end up with a longer, thinner piece of metal. But the design is continuous for the most part. And it's on the front and the back. And I also have these kind of scraps from when I was working on it. They're little, and I keep trying to think about what I want to do with them. I can see, and you might not be able to see it on the Zoom, but I can see like the patterns created by the different colors, the straight lines. So I have this plan in my mind's eye that I'm going to twist it and hammer it flat and get some kind of straight line patterns on the flat surface, but I haven't got around to doing that yet. So in the meantime, while I kind of neglected my scrap pieces of Mokame since making Kelly and Kevin's ring set, I've had them on my business cards, and I've had them on my website as well, pictures of the rings. And someone contacted me more recently that wanted to have a Mokame ring made as their wedding band. And so I've been working on that since this past May. And it's been a pretty big project for me. So I do all the things necessary to create wedding jewelry when someone wants, like diamonds. I bring in different options for them based on what criteria they give me. So that was what we started with in May and started the design process. And this is the sketch that became a painting that I made for this couple. So the ring is going to look very similar to this on the side. It's a 14 karat rose gold cast ring. So I carved a wax. And actually I brought so I always make a backup mold when I'm casting. So this was my backup mold casting wax, where if I needed it, I could make a new wax ring without having to recarve the whole thing. I believe in hedging my bets because fickle things can happen when you're working through these processes that you've done hundreds of times. You just move your arm wrong while you're trying to melt and pour the metal. And it might goof everything up. So I wanted to be ready and have that backup. But actually I was able to cast her ring, and this is the casting. It's not done yet, but you can see that I'm in progress. And I will show you more of that in a little bit. But going back to the sketches here, one of the things that she wanted was to have the Mokame included on her ring. That's how she found me, because there was Mokame on the rings on my website in my gallery. She wanted to have a Mokame ring made. So I made sketches for different ways to create her band. She wanted an inlay. She didn't want the whole ring to be Mokame. Instead, she wanted to just have parts of it. So actually, there's a couple different ways that you can approach Mokame when you're making it. One of the ways that you can do it is how I did Kelly and Kevin's rings, cutting into the metal from the top and then milling it flat. But the process that she wanted for the inlay allows for a little bit more design possibilities. And it involves hammering from the back of the metal. It's called repousser, or to push. And so you hammer from the back of the metal, and then you file the top flat, and it creates a pattern where you see that metal that actually, when you see this version of the Mokame, you may feel like it looks more like that wood grain metal. So in my sketches, I have included very kind of just ambiguous variations of what I think it could look like if you were to include it on the piece, but not a set design. It's taken some time to kind of work out what she wanted for that mokume design, but she actually wanted the rose gold, just like the other artist, or not the other artist, the other customer. And we used the same type of billet where it had 14 karat red gold, 14 karat palladium white gold, and sterling silver. Okay, so this is the billet. And the billet, this one was 6 millimeters by 6 millimeters square. And you can see the different sandwich layers. There's more sterling silver than there is red or white gold alone, but it's equal to the amount of red and white gold combined. When I was working with it, I had to mill it so it was not so thick. So here I have hammered it and then I run it through a mill, and that it's kind of like running it through a pasta maker, you know, how you make long noodles, you just kind of crank it through. I've got a mill that does the same thing, and I had to make it thinner. Before I could make it thinner though, I had to do a lot of hammering. I just like hit it with the hammer, and certain hammers are better for making it flat, but it just took time. It's kind of a physical process. And so that was one of the things that I warned her, it's going to take me longer to do this process than other ones because there's so much involved in creating it. So this is me experimenting with different ways to create patterns and what those patterns might look like on the surface. So this is the, anywhere where you see a V shape, the V shape actually turns into something that looks more like a heart. The plus signs actually will look more like plus signs, but they kind of have like a circle radiating around them, but it's not so much a circle as just an outline of the metal as you work it down. The circles do rings, like a tree ring. The straight lines are an oval, and I just played around with them. So here, this was just my very, very initial, like, let's look at it. Let's see what it looks like, what's going to happen. And I felt like, yeah, I can work with this. So going on to do a more extensive design, you can see here that it actually has a lot of different colors and it meanders. It almost reminds me of graffiti when I see it, but it's very small. It's really small. So although there are hearts and some of them you can really tell it's a heart, they're kind of abstract because it's a heart definitely on the back when I hammer it out, but it kind of gets wiggly and more like lines, kind of like tree rings, the more I file it. So I have played around with the degrees of filing and pushing the metal from the back to get more or less detail. So this is actually what the back looks like, and it's kind of a mess, but it's also kind of fun to see it because I have different chasing tools. And so I was actually, instead of using them to push along and cut lines, and you can do that to create your designs for this, I was kind of more like I was stamping with them. So when I put the square kind of pointed tip here, and it actually came out more circular than square when you file it down, but it was slightly less circular than a circle. So it was just kind of fun to have some variation between those two. And as you file, sometimes you're removing some of the layers surrounding the area that was raised up. So you get some ambiguity of color, almost like shading in the background. So I found it to be like a really unique, fun process, and very, there's more potential for drawing in a different way than like, say, something like engraving, because you've got color involved and thinking about how the color lays out. So this is the finished mokume, and this is showing you the ring from the side view where it's going to have the inlay. And you can see behind my hand here, these are the tools that I'm using when I'm making the mokume. So I have this, they have all these different shaped ends on them, and I'll hold them and then hammer on it like you'd hammer a nail. But you're not hammering all the way through the metal. You're just pushing it so that it creates a bump that pushes up from the surface. And let's see. So I've got heart here. This she thought looked like a fish, and I actually took it out earlier today. So no fish. It now looks to me like a tooth, like when you see the roots and everything. But I didn't mention that to her because I didn't want to change her perception of it, because it's not actually going to look like that, even if she chose that area for the ring, because it's too narrow. It doesn't fit the whole tooth in. So that was a good thing. So we removed the fish, and the heart became more layers where you can see more of the rings. And it's actually a little bit more abstract now. But there's several hearts placed all around here at different angles. And they're when you start finding them, you see they are hearts, but they're kind of abstract enough they don't look cliche. Because like when I was in college, okay, so I was a student of Chuck Evans, and there was two things you were not allowed to make, which probably there's a lot of them incorporated into this piece, but that was hearts and amoebas. Neither of those were allowed. And here I'm making hearts and amoebas, but I actually feel like I'm justified in making my hearts and amoebas, that they are supposed to be there like that. So on one of the ends, I had a couple of, okay, so here, this little one is doing a plus sign, and there's another one close by. It starts to curve as you're working with it. I think that was a plus sign there. It looks more like a diamond. So the surface is starting to curve, and I don't necessarily want to get rid of that curve because I'm going to need it to curve more to actually conform to the ring space. So I kind of play around with it. Okay, so this may be actually my last slide and where I'm kind of finishing up. But here, looking at this one, you can see there's several hearts incorporated into where I'm experimenting with layout and picking out the parts that will go in that piece. And hopefully this week, she's picked out where she wants her designs to be on the mokume. I'm going to get it cut out, and the ring's going to go together. And by this weekend, she'll be able to pick it up. So that's, fingers crossed, will happen. So that's where it's at. And looking forward to seeing this piece. I don't have it done yet, but I really want to have it done. And so if you keep a watch out, I will put a finished picture of it on my Instagram and Facebook. So if you don't know what those are, my Instagram for that, I think I've actually given that information to Jen for, how do you include that? Is it on the website, or is it?
It'll be on the website for the studio tour, but I will also, I can email it to this group when we're done so that you can have, I'll get to her social media pages.
Yeah, so then you can see what it looks like when it's completely done, since it's not done yet. But okay, so I think this is the end. Oh, no, maybe not. I was showing, this is the wax. Maybe I was kind of out of order with that, but carving the wax. This is called a sprue. This is actually the channel that the metal goes through in the plaster to get to the model. Here I was like testing. She has a sapphire that I'm putting here under the diamond. And so it's just a little design detail that was special to her. And the sapphire is purple. It's not blue. Sapphires come in this huge range of colors. And I actually went to my sapphire dealer's place and did some color matching for what she liked color-wise. So that was really specific to her too. Okay, that's done.
That's it.
All right. So does anyone have any questions or comments or anything?
Kyle actually asked a question while you were talking, and I just thought we'd wait since you were going to be on the same topic. And her question is, how many color combinations are there in the billets?
Okay, so it can be if you make your own billets, which can be done, you could use as many metals as you want that are good for fusing. So the most that I've seen for pre-made billets, and I ended up getting a pre-made billet for this particular job because there's a lot of kind of factors of dependability that I trust the company that I got the billet from to fuse all the layers properly better than me, because I'm not doing it on a regular basis and they are. So they only had 4 as their maximum color combination, but you could do more than that, because you could have like a silver with palladium. You got the palladium white gold. You have the potential of using yellow gold. Any golds, higher carat, 14 or higher, would work. So you could do different carats as well, because that would create some interest. Some people will do like a 22 karat yellow gold because it's got a really saturated yellow color that contrasts with some of the other colors. But basically, when you're creating the billet, it's actually thicker layers of metal to begin with, and you put them into a vise basically, and that goes into a forge, and you heat it to a certain temperature for a period of time. And then when you remove it, as long as everything fuses together like it's supposed to, you end up with a billet. And then they will have much bigger and better milling machines than I have. I have a very teeny tiny one, and there are, you know, industrial ones that are being used by other places that create these, that make the process a lot easier. But when they're making their billets initially, they're probably like, you know, 6 inches by at least 1 inch, maybe 2 inches, you know, somewhere in that range. So they're starting very, very thick. They're probably using like a 24 gauge metal. And by the time that I'm getting it with that smaller billet, it's going to be like that one was 16 layers. And so you're probably like just paper thin to begin with. And then I'm making it thinner. So yeah. But you could have a lot of colors if you have good metal for fusing.
Hey, Melissa.
I did learn a technique in college where we, instead of fusing it, we used solder between each layer, but that was not ideal for something like this.
Melissa, can you stop sharing your screen?
Sure.
Not that it's a big deal.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, now you're not stuck with a big black screen.
So, yeah. Other questions? Go ahead.
I have a question. What's your turnaround on things? I'm sure it depends, but
yeah, it really does. So when customers come in and we're designing their piece, I ask them, you know, okay, when do you need this? And so usually that's my turnaround. I need like a deadline. And it can be an arbitrary one, because a lot of people are like, whenever you can get to it. But something like this process, I forewarned them that it takes a long time to actually do the mocha. So I've spent weeks working on it. I can't work on it continuously because it's just a physically demanding process. It may not seem like it because everything's kind of little, and well, it's very little, but actually that hammering on that small scale, trying to really push the metal and all of the milling, it's kind of physically exhausting. And so I give myself a lot of extra time to do those processes, where if I'm working with someone who just wants a cast ring, I can do that faster. It takes, you know, maybe a few hours to carve the ring, and then it takes at least a day to cast it, because it has to go through several steps of a process for heating plaster to certain temperatures for certain periods of time before you can actually add the metal to it. But some of that's like not, it's not so involved on my part. I just have to, set a timer and set the kiln.
Do you work in silver as well, like silver and
Yes.
gold? Okay, great.
I work with both. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I've even, so like when you start out and you're learning how to do things, typically you work with non-ferrous metals that are not precious. So like brass and copper, and here and there I'll have someone come in, like over COVID period, I had someone come in and make several copper bracelets for them because they had arthritis and they felt that it made a difference for them. So
I have this bracelet, a postcard of a bracelet that I saw in Berlin at the museum. It's like ancient. It's a silver bracelet with garnets on it. And I've showed it to a couple jewelers and they're like, it's like, I want that, If I were going to be a jewelry burglar from a museum, that's the piece I would steal. And I was on your website while you were giving your presentations and I had the feeling that you might be able to do something similar to it. So
yeah,
I got to find the postcard now because I gave up.
Okay, there you go. Wonderful. I would enjoy working with making a silver bracelet and garnets.
Yeah, it has a little bit of gold on it too. So yeah.
Oh, cool.
Really cool.
Yay. So I'm at 507 Main Street. I am here pretty much every day, but I set my hours where I tell people I'll definitely be here between 11 and 3 on weekdays, Monday through Friday. On Saturdays, it's 11 to 2. And then Sundays, I'm here, but it's usually really random. So I just tell people to text me and see if I'm around, because I'm also oftentimes here during the evenings. A lot of the processes that I'm working on, they take time to do different steps. So I'll come in and work almost all hours.
Melissa, I'm really curious. I went to the Business of Art conference and I was kind of really taken by the how you price your work.
Oh, sure.
Segment. And it was like, they brought up stuff that I hadn't even considered. And I was sitting here going, how in the heck can you figure out a price? Because there's so many elements to your process. And do you have like a set way of pricing?
Okay. So when I'm casting, I came up with a set price of, for carving and casting, it's $250 just for the process. Okay, that does not include any of the materials. So, but that will get you a ring. And then I charge the cost of the materials, and that has a lot of variability. I can generally, once I've carved a wax, if someone wants an estimate as far as what it's going to be based on like just a design, if I have a reference of something similar where I can come up with what the weight is, then I can come up with that price pretty fast. So for instance, when I was carving the wax for the mokume ring to create this one, they were actually looking at another ring that I did, and I have the wax model here, and telling me how they liked this and some of the dimensions. Well, I had a weight for that. So I could tell them based on that weight, if they were to use the 14 karat rose gold, this is what it would probably cost, more or less, because I've got my set fees for what I charge for the casting, and then what the cost of the material would be. For the almost every job, I ask people, okay, can you give me a starting point? What do you want to invest into this piece? And then I also try to cater designs to what they want to spend, because no point in making something that outprices them. Because then I'm just stuck with it and they can't, do that. So I have to also work with my clients to meet that need as well. Is there any other questions?
I got to take off, actually. I just wanted to say really cool presentation, Melissa. I always enjoy.
Oh, thank you.
Jen and I Jen was texting me during it going like, how cool is this?
Yeah. Well, I love the processes that I've got to work on recently. You know, I've been all by myself with COVID for the most part, and here and there I get someone coming in, but the things I've got to do for them have just been awesome. So it's been a good year that way.
Are you, not in case you're not, but are you doing the studio tour again?
I am.
That's like, you're always such an awesome stop in the studio tour. And I remember it was probably the second year of the studio tour, and Jen and I, you really gave us like an in-depth tour of, we did the in-depth tour. And it was so cool. And it's when I always plug when Jen, and the Arts Council has the studio tour going. So
yeah,
I got to take off. Thanks a ton, and good to see everyone.
Thank you.
More questions or comments? Oh, Kathy, I think you're muted.
Yeah. Okay. Now I'm not muted, right?
Right.
Okay. Melissa, I've come in and looked at your thing so often, and I wanted to repeat a question I had before. And that is, I, like so many, have old family jewelry. And some of it is broken and old, wedding rings that will not be worn again. And can you use these as raw material for making a significant piece of jewelry for a family member?
Yeah, oftentimes I do recycle someone's previous jewelry, giving it new life or creating something new out of it. Inherited jewelry is oftentimes not necessarily in a condition where you can wear it, or maybe it's a design that you wouldn't wear, but by changing it, then it becomes wearable and it becomes something you can use. And silver and gold are both materials that are very easy to rework and recycle. So I can either make it into materials like sheet metal or wire, or I can cast it. Both processes work. Mm-hmm. And then I've also, but this is not so much on the art side of things, but when people are just not committed to their jewelry, they just don't want it, I do work with refiners and I can send it on to refiners instead. But I try to limit that to my clients that I actually have worked with, and not just do that as a general thing, because that's really not my end of things. I rather make it into stuff. So I rather actually work with the pieces that you have and use that material.
Am I? Oh, excuse me. No, keep. I was working with being unmuted, and so maybe now it's working, and so I'll be quiet while you finish asking what you're asking.
Did you have any more questions, Norma?
Oh, I'm sorry. Now I've forgotten what I was going to ask. It wasn't important, obviously.
Okay. Well, if you think of it, let me know. You know where I'm at.
Sure. Yeah, I know where you are.
Catherine, did you have a question?
Yes, so I think now so you're already signing people up for this year's tour, and it's going to be in October?
Yes, October 9 and 10, same times.
Okay.
I think we have 12 or 13 artists this year, so it'll be a good one. And of course, we'll watch the numbers. So if COVID becomes a problem, we'll make a new plan. But for now, we're going to do it.
Great. And then I wanted to add that Melissa made me a ring. And so the ring Melissa made for me was melted down gold for my engagement and wedding rings and all the other gold. And so that was the material she used as far as gold.
Yep. Do you have your ring on, Kathy?
It's not far away, but it depends
Oh.
on anybody wants to wait while I go get it. But I could definitely go get it if you give me 30 seconds.
I would like to see it.
Go for it.
Okay, let me go get it.
Have you ever, Melissa, this is a question I always wonder about when people work with kind of a commission style. Have you ever completely talked someone down from an idea?
When it's too complicated to be practical?
Well, whatever reason you might do it.
Yeah. That's the main time. Like, and I try to have alternative options, but you know, if it's just unfeasible, then I would. But I do like to try to honor what they would like in terms of custom work as much as possible. And so part of that is going through the design process and having them say, yes, I do want to continue on with this. And as I'm doing the design process, I do give them an estimate for what it's going to cost to bring it to fruition. So like with the Mokame, I knew what it would take to acquire the billet and came up with what I felt was a fair price to charge in terms of labor. Typically, I base it on $60 an hour. So then with that in mind, that was how I came to, okay, this is what I think it's going to cost. And they knew all of the different parts, what the cost would be, so that they weren't like surprised along the way or feeling like, you didn't tell me that was going to happen. Because gold and some of the gemstones, they're not cheap. And I know that it can be quite an investment for someone, and it's a special investment. So I want to make sure, like when I'm doing recycled pieces, sometimes I have to add more material in as well. There is an issue where when you use too much of just used gold material that hasn't been refined, and only that, you can have issues where it becomes brittle or gets a lot of porosity. So you might have to add material in. So I always let people know if I have to do that. Or sometimes it's just that you need more material to compensate for the process that you're doing.
Cool. Kathy, you're back.
I'm back, and I'm trying to make me bigger, but I don't know if I can make me bigger or not. Or maybe you can make me bigger.
Let me see. Give me a second. Spotlight. There you go.
Okay, great.
Now you're the only thing on the screen, so show us your beautiful piece.
Yeah, just let me get my technicalness.
There you go. You can see it.
At all going. That's the ring.
Mm.
And the story of the ring was that it had been.
Just put it in one place, Kathy. Don't move your hand.
Well, don't tell me what to do. Let me get my hands to obey me. Okay, here. Right, so there's a ring.
Mm-hmm.
And over here is coming, because it's a two-piece story. Okay, let me get the same planes. The diamond was from my engagement ring. And then Melissa took the diamond out. Then I gave her the gold from the engagement ring and my wedding ring and some other odd pieces of gold, and she melted them all down. And so she made the wax carving. And let me try to do justice to how. Okay, let's go study.
Yeah.
So she put extra prongs in as she was working, because the original number of prongs wasn't working with the design, and then the design has waves on the side. So I'll put it on my finger and see if that does better.
Cool. Very pretty.
Hide my face. Anyway, right. It turned out beautifully for one Christmas, and so it used all of the previous gold into, and then I picked out it was a gold colored sapphire that Melissa had in her case of sapphires. So it was one Christmas present, and then the setting of the diamond was another story. I'll have my cat playing with this if I keep it.
Yeah, I think you're gonna have us like hypnotized.
That's right.
Well, anyway, yeah, but certainly, yeah, Melissa's been great to work with. She's refashioned some earrings I had, adding other little pieces, and so they dangle differently. And then she's going to restring some beads for me. My son's brought back the Murano beads from Italy, and so that broke, and that needs restringing. And so, and then Melissa has all kinds of, you know, she'll look and she'll say, oh, well, when my silk thread comes in, then I'll be able to do the stringing on that. Or I have this little piece of something from when I was in grad school that I think will be perfect. Let me go find it. So once she's in her space, then she sees what you bring in, and whatever idea, you know, and her mental processes start matching up what she's got in her shop with whatever it is you're thinking of fixing. And so it's a very inventive process when she starts looking around and finding the right kinds of elements that she's going to use. And then she's extremely interesting.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? This has been really super great. And I'm so glad Jim listened in for personal reasons, but whatever.
Good. Oh, is he going to make you a ring? Maybe.
I guess we'll see.
Oh,
we planted the seed.
Okay, good. Well, it's a lot of fun going in there. It's so little, and there are so many interesting choices, and yeah, it's very, very cool.
Thank you.
Oh,
yeah. I've really enjoyed seeing the process you go through, because I've been in your shop many times, and you show me what you're working on, but you know, I've never seen the process before, so this was very interesting to me.
Oh, wonderful! Thank you.
Yeah, she's always part of the studio tour, so she can't come in and watch like Jim and I have done.
Right.
And
if you go in winter, you can go get warm. You can see if you can go back to where any of the heat processing happens, and you can sit and maybe while she'll talk with you a while some process is getting finished. So you'll go in and have like a half an hour of conversation about, you know, whatever. And she's a real village. You know, you look at the art, you admire, and then you visit. And then Kyle, I want to know, how are you coming along with the dots for the COVID deaths?
It's about halfway. I need to pick up some more doors.
I was telling, actually, I stopped at Melissa's today because Julia Franklin came to see me. And then Julia was saying that even though she's in Des Moines, she's been asking you, Jennifer, if she might join Okay.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I was telling her that because she hadn't seen Main Street. And so beside going to Aunt Maud's and Cornbread, then I was saying, well, Kyle has your studio here and Barbara Walton has her, there are all these different, and then Julia had done a presentation in what used to be that university space. Mm-hmm. And so, so Julia and I did a fast, this is and then Julia was going to meet with, I'll get her name. The one with the tea shop.
Kristen Roach.
Yeah, she was going to meet with her this afternoon about something. And then see that. And I was telling about the plant store where you just go in the back door, the front door, and there's all that misting of the plants to keep them healthy. And so we did like a mini tour of Main Street. It was a lot of fun.
There's a lot of cool stuff.
She's going to try to come up here more. She was like, oh.
Ames, where's that?
That's right.
Yep.
Any parting words, Melissa?
Well, thank you very much for a great evening. I really enjoyed sharing my artwork with you.
Good.
And really,
it was real interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Thank you for arranging it, Jen, and thank you for the ACAC. Perfect afternoon.
Exactly. It's fun. It's fun. The Zoom format has worked really well during this time. So I'm glad we kept it up for a little while longer. And like Melissa said at the beginning, it's a great way to see your shop because we can't all crowd in there. It would be claustrophobic and I'd knock something over and it wouldn't be pretty. So this is great.
Right.
Thank you for agreeing to be a part of it.
Good. Okay. So I'll catch up with what you're doing.
Yeah. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.